Hey, what's going on, guys? Heads here from Infinity Loops, and welcome back. Today, we are doing something a bit different. I am answering two questions that I get pretty often. Number one, what firmware do I fly the most? And that would be Quicksilver, easy answer. Number two, how do I Quicksilver? So today I will be running you through the steps of how I install Quicksilver and how I set it up for my normal everyday flyer on the Fractal 75. This is going to be using the Diamond flight controller, and everything else is just my normal 25,000 kV 0802 motors and the normal biblade Gemfan 40mm props. Everything else that I would normally use in my build will be all the same, just going to run you through the firmware end of things. So consider this your all-encompassing place to go to learn everything you want to know about Quicksilver, minus the things that I don't know and will forget to mention. Just to break down Quicksilver quickly for those who don't know, it's basically a very simple version of Betaflight. It's firmware for your flight controller for you to fly with. It's going to replace Betaflight for you. Then that begs the question, which one is better, Quicksilver or Betaflight? And honestly, there's no good answer there. Some people are going to prefer Betaflight, some people are going to prefer Quicksilver. I actually prefer both, kind of depending on what I'm flying. For now, I'll keep the intro to Quicksilver brief. If you would like to learn a little bit more about Quicksilver, you can use the chapters down here at the bottom of your screen to skip ahead to the end of the video, where I'm going to attach a long-form interview that I did asking several questions to the lead developer of Quicksilver now, Benedikt Kleiner, otherwise known as Hanfer. He ran me through the history of Quicksilver, what it was before he was involved, and what he plans on having it be in the future. So if you're interested in any of those things and just learning a little bit more about the firmware, skip ahead to the end and check that out. For the rest of you, let's get our micro USB cables plugged into the PC. Since we are going to be working on a Diamond flight controller, much like any flight controller, but especially a Diamond, I would recommend setting up a small fan on your desk if you don't have one already. If you're ever going to be working, doing a lot of firmware stuff, especially with a Whoop or any quad for that matter, it's great to have some source of air moving over it. If you can get a direct source, like I just put mine right on top of a fan, I put a little blob of blue tack on the top to just kind of hold the quad still, but then I can plug it in and just leave it there, and it'll stay nice and cool while we're working on it, especially with the Diamond. Okay, before we even plug our Whoop into the computer, the first thing we're going to do is open up a Chromium-based browser. I like using Google Chrome for this, although I think some other Chromium browsers may work. I haven't really tested those, so if you have Google Chrome, use that. If you don't have Google Chrome, maybe just download it and use that, because I know it'll work with that. I've popped over to Google and just typed in Boss Hobby Quicksilver. Boss Hobby, one word, space, Quicksilver, one word. The exact URL that you would need is config.bosshobby.com. Once you get to this page, sometimes, especially if you're revisiting this page, if you've used it previously, you will see a grayish button right here that says Update Now or something along those lines. Make sure that you click that. If you do see it, what it'll do is just give you the most recent version of the configurator that you're going to want to use whenever you're installing Quicksilver. And we're going to start by clicking Reset to Bootloader. Now, since I already have a version of Quicksilver on this flight controller, I'm just going to be updating our version of Quicksilver, but I'm going to do a fresh flash, so nothing will be saved previously, and if anything is saved, I will show you what the default is versus what I use. But we're going to go ahead and click on Quicksilver and connect. Now we should be in bootloader mode. We can leave it on the most recent release. We're going to use the most recent stable release they have, and then we're going to pick our target. So since I'm using the Diamond, if you're using one as well, and mine has Express LRS in it, we're going to be using the Crazy Beef for ELRS target. If you need help finding which target to use, I will leave a link down below in the description for Quicksilver's Discord. Pop over there and you can ask them. They are super helpful. They are very knowledgeable about, obviously, everything there is to know about Quicksilver, much more than I. So if you need help with any of that stuff, you can always pop over there and don't hesitate to ask. Very helpful. Now that we are here, we can go ahead and click Flash. And now we see our bootloader instead of Quicksilver there. So we will click Select on that, and now we just let it do its thing. And just like that, we are all finished. It has verified. So now we can go ahead and connect to the flight controller. Okay, I'm actually glad that it did this. So I just got an error that says connection to the board has failed. This happens sometimes with Chrome. I'm not sure exactly why. I've brought it up to the dev team before, and I'm not sure that they are even able to replicate it, but if it is happening for you, I have found that if you just try it a few more times without unplugging, sometimes you're going to get it to load like this, where you'll see no info. It won't show anything really here. If you disconnect and reconnect, now it's filled it in. So now it says last modified 55 years ago. It's a brand new flash, but it has all your data here. Now you see your MCU, you see your gyro. Everything has been auto-filled in, which that is what you're looking for. So if you get any errors while you're trying to connect, if it's that error that I just got, just try connecting again. If it does actually connect and you don't see anything in the name field especially, or the last modified field, make sure to just disconnect, reconnect. You don't have to actually unplug it, just disconnect, reconnect from the software. Now that we are in, let's just go through all the tabs up top, and I'm going to show you exactly how I set up each tab. I'll make sure to chapter them out on the bottom of your screen here so you can follow along at home. For right now, we are on the Profile tab. This is just basically going to be a quick overview of what you got cooking with this flight controller. If you want, in the future, if you want to save the profile you're using to perhaps load it on an identical build, there is a way to do that just right here by hitting Save Profile. It'll save it as a file on your desktop just like you would with Betaflight, and then you hit Load Profile when you have the new build in, and you can just drag and drop it right on there. For our purposes today, we are not going to touch this page at all. We're going to scooch right over to the Setup page. Now, first, just looking at the screen, you can see that it is showing our drone is upside down when it is very clearly right side up, sitting on top of the fan for me. So that means two things. Number one, our gyro is upside down, and that's because we are doing a fractal build and our flight controller is upside down. Secondly, it means that we're going to need to switch our motor positions, because currently where it thinks the two motors on the right are, it thinks those are on the left now, since the flight controller is flipped upside down. So we're going to go through all that. First off, let's go through this page. Very first thing you're going to want to do with a fractal build when you have it upside down is hit Flip Gyro. We're going to apply those changes, and it'll immediately snap right side up. And then we're just going to test our orientation. So if I go left, it goes backwards, which means we need to rotate, I believe 90 degrees clockwise should do it. Oh, not clockwise, counterclockwise. Boop. Apply. Okay, now if we go left, we go left. If we go forward, we go forward. If we go back, we go back. Our gyro is now currently positioned properly. So we can apply that again just to make sure. We are going to be running a props out formation on our propellers. We're going to leave all of this stuff the way that it is. The only thing we're going to change is our turtle throttle percentage. I raised that up to 100. What this will do is just exactly what it sounds like. How much throttle is being applied whenever you go into turtle mode and boop your stick in either direction. One thing that is different from Quicksilver from Betaflight is turtle mode. That is very different in Quicksilver for a few reasons. Number one, in Quicksilver, whichever direction you push on the stick, you don't need to hold it down. You can just tap it, and it will rev the motor for you enough to flip you over. That is where that throttle percentage for your turtle mode comes into play. The other way that turtle mode is completely different from Betaflight, we're going to change a little bit later once we get into our switches, but turtle mode is actually automatic on Quicksilver. And what I mean by that is when you land and you're upside down, Quicksilver obviously can tell that you're upside down. So if you arm your radio, you can set turtle mode up to automatically turn on when you arm and you're upside down. So you don't need to flip a secondary switch and then arm. You just would arm, disarm, arm again once you're flipped up right side up, and then you can take off. It puts you in and out of turtle mode automatically. I love that feature because I hate using switches. Less switches I use on my radio, the better. So I use one with Quicksilver, and that's turtle mode and arm, disarm, all on the same switch. I'll show you how to set that up once we get to that page. For now, we're going to apply our changes to the turtle throttle percentage. Here we're going to set our RX, which is on serial port 1, and our VTX, which is on serial port 2. We're going to click Apply, and then you will need to do a reboot after this. So let's go ahead and give her a reboot. So switching back over to our setup page, we'll scroll down, and now, since we have set our serial port for RX and our VTX, we now see that this has all been filled out as well. So it's going to have our protocol is already in there. We can set, we're going to be on race band 8, and our power levels are all right here. Now, the Diamond does not have these power levels here, and so I think the way that you need to do this is the power levels will vary. Like it'll be a pit mode, and then you'll have like a low 25, and then you'll get the 100, and then I think there's a 250. Either way, what I usually do is set it to 300. One other thing that I'll change is sometimes I'll change the voltage here up to 3.7 for the low battery warning is what that's for. The reason I change that is because sometimes I won't get the battery warning until it's too late for me, like those BT2 or A30 batteries just fall off so fast. I have the warning pop on slightly earlier. It's not really going to give you the warning at 3.7. It'll give you the warning that's at like 3.7 if you're landed at 3.7, like resting 3.7. So you can leave it at 3.6, but it might be a little annoying. You might get that low battery warning way too late. If that's the case, just bump that up to 3.7, and that should remedy that. Now we'll do an apply one more time for the page, just make sure we got everything in there, and then we're going to shoot over to our rates. Here is a quick change. I just switched this from silverware to Betaflight rates, and then what we're going to do is knock this down to 0 on the expo field, and we're going to knock this down to 0 instead of 1.3. Those are my rates. This is what I run on everything. My Cinewhoops, my 5-inch quads, my toothpicks, my tiny whoops. Everything is exactly as you see it here. We'll apply that real quick, and we're going to scroll on down. Now, here is our PID tuning. This is by far one of my favorite parts of Quicksilver. This is so simple, and I know it looks maybe a little more complicated than you would imagine than like the sliders do over on Betaflight. Quicksilver has gone through the trouble of putting in these presets here. Now these presets, if you ask anybody who has flown Quicksilver, are very, very good. Now later on in the video, if you skip towards the end near that interview, you will hear Hanfer explain this by saying that he normally would do a whole lot of flights with different kinds of builds that are around the same area as these presets, and then kind of find like a happy middle ground of all the different builds that he tried for that one, like 75mm 1S, a bunch of different 75mm 1Ss, get tunes for all of them and get them all flying nice, and then just kind of find where the average was for all of them. That's going to be your preset. Now, the preset are great for two reasons. Number one, it's great for people that don't want to tune too much, like me, because I hate tuning. I just want to fly. So a lot of these presets will fly fantastic right on first flash. Drop that preset in and then roll. You're good to go. The other beauty of these presets is that it puts you extremely close to a perfect tune on whatever you got built. So if you have a quad that is flying really rough and you put a preset on it that flies great, you can just tinker with those numbers just a little bit more here, and you can get it ironed out to exactly where you want it. This is all things that you can do within the goggles through the OSD menu as well. What I'm going to do, what I normally do, is on PID Profile 1, I will click on the 75mm 1S, load that, and then I'll go to PID Profile 2, and I will load the next one up, which would be the 2-inch build. I'll load that one here, and then we're going to save that, and we'll switch back to the 75. Now, the reason I do this is because if I take off, especially on a new build, if I take off and the 75 tune is just slightly too hot for whatever I got and it's flying away, if I land and go into my OSD menu and switch to PID Profile 2, that'll give me a little bit more leeway in that tune to where it'll fly great. It might just be a little loose to where I need to tighten up the numbers a little, but it'll put me in that ballpark of where I need to be. Now, after we have set both of those PID profiles up, we'll hit apply, and then this is your filtering down here if you want to play around with that. Normally, I don't mess with the filtering at all because I just haven't felt the need to. We'll see how it flies after we're done here, but I don't think I'm going to have to play with the filtering at all here, so as long as everything has been applied, we can skip over to the next page, which is your receiver. Now is our time to turn on our radios and get our Express LRS all hooked up. All right, we're ready to go there, and now we just need to identify it as Express LRS. Then it says RX status is now in binding mode. We're going to type in our bind phrase because that's what we use. Mine is connect me. Apply that. Apply here. Now it says bind has been saved. And if I look at my radio, I now have telemetry on my radio. So we can scroll down here, and now we see our channels are moving and all of our switches are here. So one thing that I would explain here quickly is about the auto turtle mode. To turn on auto turtle mode, you just need to turn it on. That's it. You just leave it on as is. And now if you are upside down, thank you. Now if you're upside down and you're disarmed, when you rearm, you will be in turtle mode. You can flip yourself over, and then you can disarm, arm again, and off you go. Now, if you see here, we're flipping our switches. I got channel 8 is moving. That's the arm switch that I would normally like to use for my radio. So we're going to change our aux arming to channel 8. And then this idle up is basically, it's kind of like air mode. So if you like air mode, I would set this as well and leave that set to channel whatever you're going to have your arming switch set to. Everything else here I leave alone. If you see where it says aux prearm, it just says on. It doesn't actually say a channel. Leave that on, and then it'll assume your prearm is on. So if you turn it off, sometimes people can't arm their quads anymore. So don't turn any switches off here. You can leave all of this stuff on. The only thing you're ever going to want to change is turtle mode. If you'd like to set it to a switch, find out what switch you want to use. Like I would use switch 7. Or number set, channel 7. So we would go to channel 7 if I wanted to do it that way. But I prefer using it auto if I can, so I just leave it as on. We have our arming set, and that should do it for our receiver page. And we're moving right along. We're making good progress here. Now that we're over on our OSD screen, we can start to add in all of the things we would normally add to our OSD, whatever you like to use. There's a lot of things that I don't use that I'm going to turn off, like cell count. Filtered voltage is usually the one that I would not use, but this is if you want a live readout of your voltage as you're flying. This will give you a readout of what you'll land at, approximately what your battery will be when you land. So I like to use that one, and we will put ours up here. I feel like when I use the fuel gauge one, I kind of get more flight time, like I don't leave flight time on the table, whereas when I'm using the warning, sometimes I bring it in a little early because the warning will start to go off. And I just assume, you know, I don't really have enough juice left for this. I'll just bring it back in. So I've started to use fuel gauge vaults recently, and I've actually liked that quite a bit. So I think Prop Junkie is actually the one who mentioned it to me, and I tried it, and I've liked it. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out as well. We can also turn off gyro temp, flight mode. I don't really need RSSI because I don't do long distance with a whoop. And ELRS is definitely not going to go out on me anytime soon. The stopwatch is going to be your flight time, so I will put that up there with my voltage. System status, I usually leave. That's good right there. Throttle can go away, and the current can go away. My OSD I like nice and clean. So if you're trying to run your OSD like I do mine, this is exactly how it goes. So let's go to our motor tab. We're going to turn our flight controller on. And now we have power over here. Let's go ahead and test our first motor. Should be front left. And I am seeing the back left spin, which means back left and front left need to swap. So down here, real easy. Pin 0 is currently on back left. Pin 1 was on the front left. So we do that. We're going to apply those. And now we double check again. Now our front left spins and our rear left spins. Next over here, same thing. Just got to do the same exact swap. 2 to 3, 3 to 2. And now we just make sure our motors are spinning the correct direction. All right, we're all good there. So we will make sure we apply multiple times, several times, every time I apply. Now that we are here, one other thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you have Bluejay flashed to your ESCs. Let's open up another tab, and we're going to look up ESC Configurator. And we can go ahead and connect to that. Find our flight controller there. Connecting. All of our motors are already all good there, so we'll make sure you could check here if you needed to, but we're all good there. Make sure your radio is off, which it is. Let's read our settings. And here we already have Bluejay flashed on everything, so we're all good there. We don't need to change anything. Now, if our ESCs are all flashed properly, all of our motors are spinning the proper direction, and our motors are now in the right position. Only other thing that could cause an issue on takeoff is 1, if your props are on wrong, or 2, if you come into this menu here and go to setup, there is a props in or props out option here. you need to make sure you have these arrows facing the right direction of whichever way your propellers are spinning. So since we are for sure props out, we're verified there, we're all good. Let's disconnect, let's get a battery in, and take her for a test flight. I'll tell you, the one more thing about Quicksilver is you will notice it's going to take a minute to get your last 2 beeps in, the last final beep beep. That is very normal. Don't think anything of it. Very normal. Happens to the best of us. All right. Oh, yeah. She's flying good. She's flying real good. I like this. I don't think I'm going to change a thing. Feels like it's flying just fine. Very nice. All right, there you go. That, my friends, is Quicksilver. You should be ready to rock. And if you are not, like I said, I'm going to leave a link down below in the description to where you can head over to their Discord and ask them any questions that you may have. One other thing you can do is come over to our Discord as well. That'll be down below. If you want to ask me any questions, you can always feel free to hop over there. I am in there for the majority of the day and night. You can tag me, and if I'm not there, I'll get back to you as soon as I get back to the Discord, but it's never too far from when you send your message to when I respond. So if you can't get an answer over at Quicksilver, feel free to pop over in our Discord server. Don't hesitate either way, either place. Make sure that you get to the finish line with this firmware and try it out. Give it the old college try. I do think some of you may find the simplicity of it is really rewarding when you're just trying to get a build up in the air and not mess with it at all. I just want to fly. Quicksilver is the way for me to do that. Might be the way for you. Make sure to check it out. If you're interested, I'll leave any valuable links for you down below. Make sure to hang around after this because I'm going to have a long-form conversation attached at the end of this with Hanfer or Benedikt Kleiner. If you are a member on this YouTube channel, you may have already seen this interview. I released it to you guys months ago as a members-only video, just the interview itself. Let me know what you think of Quicksilver. If you had a good time with it, if you hate it, if you're going back to beta flight, which one you like better or find more simplistic, or if there's anything you like about Quicksilver over beta flight or vice versa. I'd love to hear it all. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Enjoy this interview, and I will see you in the next one.
We don't talk about the avocado.
Okay, so first off, what should everyone call you?
My full name is Benedikt Kleiner.
Benedikt Kleiner?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what I'm usually using is B Kleiner. Only the first character of my first name and then my last name.
Okay, so let's talk about Quicksilver a little bit. Why did you decide to make this firmware?
I get asked this quite a lot, actually, and I guess everybody expects that there is like this, I don't know, I guess people have this imagination of it that I don't know, that I stood up and said beta flight is not good enough or some stupid shit like that, but of course that's not what happened, to be honest.
Sure, I didn't think it was that dramatic, I guess, but
yeah. First off, it's just fun to me. Like I like doing it. Like it's a fun little hobby to me. I like flying, of course. I do a lot of flying actually, and yeah, I just like the challenge of developing it. And as for how I got into it, basically that's literally what happened. I was part of another open source project for quite a while, but that basically came to more or less its natural conclusion. I was doing World of Warcraft modding before.
Oh, okay.
And there was this software called Nogget, where you could basically create your own maps. It was basically a level editor for World of Warcraft. But this community kind of went downhill when they launched. I don't know if you're aware of the World of Warcraft scene, but they have now these different kinds of realms you can subscribe to. Like you can play older versions now. And this was a big portion of the modding scene, actually, to be able to play older World of Warcraft versions. But then Blizzard made it available like directly from them. So this modding scene kind of stopped. Yep. And I always liked having projects, you know. I always like tinkering with something. So this World of Warcraft modding thing kind of came to its end, and I started looking into new projects, new challenges to tinker with. And yeah, one day I was just sitting there and was playing with. I used to run a lot of Inductrix, Blade Inductrix back in the day.
Sure.
Don't know if you remember that.
Yes, yeah, very familiar.
Yeah, and eventually they stopped selling. Like they did this FPV version, and then it kind of stopped. They stopped doing it, and more or less I was running out of Inductrix boards. They were getting hard to get in Germany, and yeah, and I never had gotten too much into running whoops on Betaflight. I had run it on different crafts, but for the whoops I always stuck to the Inductrix boards. I would buy full Inductrix kits, remove the boards, and build my own micros out of it.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. A lot of people were doing it back in the day. There were even these Inductrix kind of clone boards. It was a whole thing. Yeah, so I was kind of forced to switch to regular Betaflight boards for my whoops because I couldn't get the other ones anymore. And yeah, I was sitting there and tinkering with it, and it just didn't quite behave like I wanted it to. Like for a whoop, I always thought, especially with the Inductrix, I thought it was always quite nice that you basically took them out of the package, modified them if you wanted to, and they would just work. There was not a lot of fuss with them.
Right.
And with Betaflight, especially in the early days, I mean, these days I gotta say, Betaflight works pretty well on whoops. Like it's not a huge deal anymore. But back in the day, like I think it was Betaflight version 3.2 or something. It was quite a pain to get a whoop to work at all on Betaflight. And so I was just sitting there and was thinking about it, like how hard would it be? How hard would it be to write your own firmware that runs on whoops specifically? And I was always into micros for some reason or another. I always have had 5-inch and bigger quads actually, but for some reason I always liked the tiny ones. And back in the day, the place to hang out if you were into micros was the Micromotor
Warehouse.
Yeah, forums. And I was quite active on there, and so was Not Fast Enough, Travis. And I don't know how it came to be. I think he had a forum post on there where he was explaining how his fork of silverware. Yeah, and so I hit Travis up and went like, "Yay! I see you basically done this. What I would be interested in doing. How hard is it? Do you have any advice on how to get started?" And well, he did. He gave me some advice, some pointers on how to get started with developing your own firmware. And then I did. Like I started my own firmware completely from scratch. And yeah, in the span of a week or something, I had something that hovered.
Oh wow!
And
so when was this? What's the timeline here? Like what year are we talking when you first started this project?
To be clear, the project I was talking about right now is not Quicksilver.
Oh, okay. So we're pre-Quicksilver here. Okay.
That's pre-Quicksilver. As I understand it, Travis was already working on Quicksilver at the time, but I was doing my own thing. Like at first, I really wasn't interested in joining any big project. It was just something I did for fun, like a weekend coding project.
Yeah.
That's how it started out. And oh god, must have been 2015, 16. I think.
Okay.
So quite a while ago, actually. I mean, the forums, the Micromotor warehouse forums have been down for 4 years or something, I think. I tried to help the guy who was running it back in the day. He was also called Benedikt. I tried to help preserve it, but it didn't end up working out.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah. So we're talking like 20. So when did you start work on Quicksilver?
So I was doing like my own thing, but I was in contact with Travis, and eventually he went like, "Okay, at first, I think he didn't want to, like he wanted to test the waters basically because he didn't know how competent I actually was, and he just thought, yeah, this guy is just, I don't know, not talking shit, but he I don't know how serious he is. And then I built this prototype, and I showed him. We were on Discord already at that time, and eventually he went like, okay, I gotta show you something, and he invited me to the Quicksilver repository. Yeah, and he and some other guy called Bob already got started on it. It was very very early days. They weren't very far along, but those two guys basically invented Quicksilver. I'm not the original author. I didn't think of the name or any of it.
Okay.
It's just that I joined the project very, very early on. Yeah, and one thing about the other two guys, they are very, very, very smart people, but neither of them are professional developers. But I was.
Okay.
So I could bring a lot of the skills and techniques to the table they weren't aware of. But both of them are very talented in terms of math and like general testing, this kind of stuff. Yeah, and then we started developing Quicksilver and got more and more serious about it. And it was closed source, like just something we worked between us three and maybe 5 or 6 other peoples for, I think, over 2 years, maybe even 3, until we got to a point where we were happy enough that we said, okay, now we're gonna put it public. And in that span of 2 or 3 years, the personal situation of the other two guys changed quite drastically. Travis basically became a farmer. They ended up buying a farm, and he had less and less time to actually work on it. And Bob basically became the chance to become like a hobby racing driver, which was always a bit of a dream of him. So those two guys had less and less time for Quicksilver, but yeah, I was still hanging in there basically, and it was quite a lot of fun to me. So eventually we agreed that I would overtake the project, and those two guys, basically retired from it. But they are still hanging, especially Travis, not fast enough. He's still hanging around the Discord, so we are still in contact. But yeah, I'm now the lead developer of it.
Okay. So just jumping back just a tiny bit, because you were saying you did have that developer experience. Did you have college or I guess university for classes for any of these things, or was it just a hobby and you got into it yourself?
No, I'm a professional developer. I work as full-time as a software engineer.
Okay.
I went to university originally to become a games developer. I studied games development. The games stuff never worked out. I work in like big cloud infrastructure and software now. I develop apps. But yeah, I'm a trained developer.
Okay. So going back to Quicksilver here, so the initial focus of Quicksilver was it always meant for micros as far as when they were developing it before you jumped in, or was it more just kind of like all over software, like or firmware? It was kind of meant for anything that would fly.
The origin story there is okay. Maybe we gotta start a little bit back further.
Sure.
Like there is in the early days of Whoops, there was the Inductrix basically, which was a commercial product, and then there were a bunch of like other toy tiny crafts. They weren't even called tiny whoops at that point. Chessie hadn't come up with the term yet, but they were tiny little quadrocopters.
Okay.
And some guys figured out that they were running F0 chips from ST, from ST Micro, and those were programmable, basically. So you could buy these toy drones, rip the controllers out, and flash them with their own firmware. And out of that, a firmware emerged called Silverware, which was worked on these toy boards, and people were flashing it to these toy crafts and make them fly better. And Silverware was invented by a guy going by the name Silver AG, and it only worked on the toy FCs. Okay. And not fast enough. Travis and another guy called Bob, different Bob, started developed these boards which would work on Silverware. That's what was called the Alien Whoop Zero, and that was basically a direct alternative to Inductrix boards. And that was working quite well, but they quickly reached the limits of what was possible there. Like the F-Zero MCU is very limited, and they reached the ceiling of what they could do there. And you gotta imagine, these were days where whoops were brushed exclusively. Nobody was running brushless. Tiny brushless motors didn't exist yet. So the other problem was that we suddenly saw tiny brushless motors emerging, but we didn't have any. There was no Silverware version or boards which worked with brushless. So the first thing that happened was that Travis created a Silverware version that worked with brushless. And interestingly enough, the characteristics of a brushed versus a brushless motor is different enough that you need some fine adjustments in the firmware. So they started realizing, okay, we need to extend beyond Silverware. And another thing of interest back then clearly was to bring Silverware to bigger crafts, because everybody enjoyed how it was flying, be it in acro or angle mode. And so, there definitely was an intention to bring Silverware to larger crafts, especially like 3-inch quads, because those were also in a place where they didn't have like a good firmware. Don't get me wrong. I think Betaflight is excellent, always was, but it always was not geared towards. But Betaflight is great in making basically anything fly, but they have a slight bias for larger crafts, like 5-inch and up.
Right. Yeah. It seems like that's more of their demographic is the larger quads.
Yeah, and today I wouldn't sweat putting Betaflight on a 3-inch or even a Whoop. It works just fine.
Sure.
Like it's a great piece of software. No discussion here. It works awesome. It's just back in these days that wasn't quite the case. And I still think Betaflight is like the open source firmware for these kind of aircrafts. And as such, they have almost a responsibility to incorporate as many features and techniques as they possibly can. Like they almost have no choice. Like if somebody submits a good pull request to Betaflight, they kind of have to merge it, because it would be similar to, I don't know, Microsoft rejecting some program because they didn't think it was adequate. Like they can't do that. So that always puts Betaflight in this situation where it's always super broad in what it can do, which also has its downsides, I feel like. I feel like the fact that they incorporate so much leaves some potential for optimization, let's call it that.
Yeah, I guess, and the more features you're adding into your firmware, that leaves more room for error, I guess, as well. More things to go wrong.
Yeah, more things to go wrong, and especially it has a huge impact on your user experience. Like even in my day job, I'm always about like user experience. Like how does it feel to use a piece of software? And with Betaflight, it always kind of feels like there is this overwhelming amount of options available to you, which makes it kind of hard to navigate. I'm, with my little firmware, which I developed mostly for fun, I'm in the fortunate position that I can just say, no, I'm not going to do this feature.
Yeah.
Honestly, if there was ever a situation where Betaflight was in danger of dying, in a heartbeat, I would drop Quicksilver and join the Betaflight team, because Betaflight is like the lingua franca of quads. It needs to exist for this hobby to exist, but it isn't in any danger of dying.
No, yeah. I
There
don't
are
think so.
plenty of developers, very competent developers there. So I'm just happy doing my own thing and having my own little playground where I can do stuff.
Okay.
Um,
So speaking of the developer team, are you aware of how many developers Betaflight has?
oh gosh, I could probably ask them.
Oh, it's okay. It's not super important. I was just for conversation. I was just curious.
Yeah, there are plenty. Yeah, the thing with this kind of stuff is everybody wants to do the fancy stuff. Like everybody wants to add new features, new flight modes, whatever. And a huge portion of developing a firmware is basically plumbing. Like you gotta make it work on different MCUs. You gotta make sure that it runs fast enough, and all of that stuff. And I think there is a bit of a disproportion there of people which do the plumbing and people which just want to add new features. But they are still fine on the plumbing guys, which are the important ones.
Yeah.
And just to call some guys out, Mr. Steve, from what I see on the pull requests, he is just an amazing developer. He's one of these fabled 10x developers. He gets so much stuff done. And then I think his name is Jack Blackman. Basically the same deal. Like highly competent guys, which get so much stuff done.
Okay. All right. So to go back to Quicksilver, what can you tell me about the quote unquote the dev team for Quicksilver?
At the present, it's basically just me as core developer. So if somebody out there would like to join the core dev team, hit me up, because that's basically puts the whole project in a bit of a vulnerable position. However, especially recently, in open source, you quite often have these, I would always call them hit and run contributors, where there's this person which suddenly shows up, submits one or two pull requests, and then is never seen or heard of again. And that's very common. Also happens with Betaflight all the time. Like that's how most of the pull requests basically come to be.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to report the number of those kind of pull requests increased quite a lot in recent months.
That's
I'm
fantastic.
seeing more and more of them.
Good. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So currently it's you as the core developer, and then who do you have helping?
Steve, Chaotix, big shout out to him. I couldn't do it without him. He basically, I'm spread pretty thin time-wise, and he takes care of most of the community work. He helps people around the Discord. Yeah, couldn't do it without him. He is very, very valuable to the project, and he also every big decision about Quicksilver, he has the second vote. Like we always decide what to do next together. Then I gotta shout out Mr. Rebel, because he just does so much testing for me.
Yeah, Mr. Ravel's awesome.
Yeah, for those people who don't know, they live stream their weekly practice on YouTube. And what he does for me is basically, before every practice, he asks me, hey, is there something new I should test? Flashes it to his race rig, and then I get to watch him live on YouTube beat the shit out of whatever I just wrote. And that's just the most valuable feedback you can get, because I can watch him do it. I can get a sense of how it's performing in scenario where if somebody is just flying around a little bit, usually problems don't show up. But if you put it in like a race situation where it is pushed,
you got to make it angry.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta make it angry.
Yeah, understood for sure. So big ups to those two, Mr. Rabble and Chaotix. Yeah, definitely. I've definitely gotten help from Chaotix more than once. So yeah, he's
great.
Outside of the simplicity of Quicksilver, is there any other reason you would recommend someone use Quicksilver over firmware like Betaflight?
No. To be honest, I'm getting kind of tired of this discussion because it's some idiots on the internet show up saying like, yeah, he doesn't know and Betaflight is much better and stuff, and I'm just sitting there and smirking because like there is no beef between us and Betaflight.
Yeah, I don't see why there would be. That'd be crazy for you guys to have a problem with each other. It seems like you would learn more from each other.
Yeah, we are working with each other, and they basically went, okay, guys, you obviously got the Whoop stuff covered. Please, you interact with Betaflight or whoever else, Beta FPV or whoever else on the Whoop stuff. And out of this thing actually came a situation where I started submitting more and more pull requests to Betaflight. Like it's not an official thing or anything, but I'm quite regularly committing code to Betaflight.
Really?
So.
Well, that's
I don't know.
No, that's cool. I had no idea that. I figured you guys talked. Just as far as firmware developers don't seem like the type to be sitting around talking shit about each other. You seem more so like you would want to learn from each other.
I was actually I was talking to Rebel recently about exactly this. Technically speaking, the Toyota Corolla is the best car ever built. Like on paper. Mm-hmm. It has sold the most units, it has the best crash ratings. It's on paper, it's the best car ever. However, nobody in their right mind would go out and declare everybody should only buy Toyota Corollas because they are the best car. That's just stupid. Nobody would do that. Right. And I feel like with this firmware stuff, it's quite similar. Like, of course, Betaflight is the best firmware. Like, there is no discussion about it. It has the most developers. It has the most features. It's the most battle-proof. Similar to, like, how on paper the Corolla is without discussion the best car. Betaflight is without discussion the best firmware. So if you're just looking for something that will work in any case, and a lot of people are familiar with it, yes, do go ahead and flash Betaflight. However, if you want to try something else, if you want to see a different take on it, if you want something that is more transparent about some of its features, maybe give Quicksilver a try.
Okay, that's a really good analogy. Actually, I like the Corolla analogy because that makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm not saying like what does Quicksilver have over Betaflight, but more so like why even put as much time as you have into the project as opposed to just using Betaflight. But it sounds like it was more of a passion project as it started.
It has to be
that you just enjoyed developing.
But nobody does this because they are looking for. I mean, to be honest, I find it quite funny how fast people get about the pure existence of Quicksilver. Like, yeah, I'm developing for fun. I'm doing it because I want to, not because, like, of course, it's always great to see people flash it and have fun with it and so on. But to be frank, I don't really care either way if you use it or not.
Okay, yeah, I mean, honestly, you shouldn't care. That's a good outlook on it. If you care, it's a stressful thing to add on yourself for no reason.
Yeah.
Okay, so you being the core developer at the moment on Quicksilver, are you aware of any Easter eggs you could share that are within Quicksilver that maybe normal user wouldn't notice or hasn't seen?
Do you already know something?
No, I don't. I'm
Okay.
asking more so just to put it out there. If you want to put it out there, you don't have to.
I'm not gonna directly point to it, but there is some shenanigans that can be enabled by adjusting a value directly in the profile YAMLs you can dump from your flight controller.
Okay. Okay, that's a good enough Easter egg or breadcrumb there. Let people go try to find it.
Because if you can read the source code, it's not super hard to figure it out. So
Okay.
I'm just gonna leave it at that, and yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, moving on. This was a question from the chat. Is there any plans in the future for a PID slider?
No.
Okay.
I get the idea of the pit slider. It makes sense because one of the most important aspects of tuning a quad is the ratio between P term and D term. And in that regard, the slider makes a lot of sense. However, since Betaflight has implemented the slider, we have seen something that I personally find kind of concerning. People are getting worse at tuning their quads. There is a bit of an art to it, but it's not as complex as a lot of people seem to think. And this slider thing seems to make this worse. It seems to make it even more daunting to some people to go in there and adjust the values. And I think the slider is highly valuable to get it roughly right. But to fine tune it, I think you need to adjust the raw values.
Okay. So another question. This question I think is more so just to get it on the record. I already know the answer, but has Quicksilver ever been angle mode only?
At no point was it ever angle mode only. No, it's kind of funny to me that this seems to come up all the time because Silverware, where this all started, basically most people flashed it to make the acro mode viable on these toy crafts. So if you really want to get into it, Silverware and Quicksilver actually exist because of acro.
No, that's actually a better answer than I was expecting. More in depth. Okay, do you know this? I know you're not from the original team, but do you know the origin of the avocado logo?
We don't talk about the avocado.
Okay.
It
Okay.
just is.
Fair enough. How many tries in the early days when this was being developed? Do you know how many tries it was that you said there was a moment of or a period of testing before it went public? Do you know how long that period went, or how many iterations were gone through before it went public?
I got in there before testing actually started. When I got in there, it was just like a proof of concept, which was flashed on a breadboard and never flown. So I've seen all of it, and it was a period of about 3 years.
3 years. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That was from the inception all the way up till going public.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So how long has Quicksilver been public? Do you know like a rough estimate on that?
Oh, good. When did we publish it? May of 2020.
Wow. Okay. Jeez, man. It seems like that was not that long ago, but it was 4 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, the Corona years. They just didn't happen.
Yeah.
To me, it felt like 2 years maybe, but no, it's been 4.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. That went fast. What does the future of Quicksilver look like to you?
Green.
Green.
Um, Green. Yeah, I don't know. I like the color. I like the color scheme we have going. Um, no, to be honest, like of course, there's a bit of a roadmap in my head. Like I would like to reach 1.0 this year. I don't know if you are gonna be able to pull it off, but yeah, if we can make it happen, I would like to see 1.0 this year.
What would stop
Um,
you? Time?
hmm?
What would be the thing that would stop you? Time, or is it a matter of just getting there, getting down the roadmap?
Mm, to be honest, we have pushed it back quite a few times now because we started running into things where we said, okay, we would like to see this done before we call it. When you release a software as 1.0, you don't call it done, but there is the sentiment of okay, now it's feature complete in a broader sense. And we have actually pushed 1.0 back a couple times now because we have discovered, okay, there is maybe this thing we should do before we consider it feature complete. As far as me being able to make that happen or not, yeah, a big factor is going to be time, of course. Then something that is always taking quite a lot of time out of my schedule of finishing 1.0 is when new MCUs, new microcontrollers get integrated into flight controllers. Like, for example, right now I'm working on porting Quicksilver to a new chip called the G4. And maybe there is going to be another new chip this year. So if that happens, we want to be able to support most of the boards out there. We're never going to be able to support all of them, but most of them. And for that, it's quite important that we establish this MCU support as soon as the first boards hit the market. Yeah, and those are things which can cost quite a lot of time. And another thing, to be honest, is partially like I develop Quicksilver mostly how I feel like. Sometimes I sit down and I do just some boring maintenance thing, which puts me closer towards 1.0. But sometimes, I don't know, I get some itch and I start working on a new feature, and that doesn't really help me towards
Yeah,
1.0
yeah.
because like this is my hobby project. It's not a commercial thing, and just to make it um, again, it's not super important to me, but it's still nice to see when other people are able to use it and have fun using it. So I do try to take that into consideration. But at the same time, like I will work on the features I feel like working on. And to be honest, it's also a reason for some of the stuff for how some of the things have been going with it, because there is this split between there are certain features the users want, and then the features I actually want to work on. And I do try to incorporate both, but at the end of the day, it's my hobby project, and I'm gonna work on the stuff I actually want. And funny thing actually is the stuff that, and I don't want to throw shade or anything, but I always feel like the stuff that actually makes people use Quicksilver at the end of the day are the stuff that is done with a lot of love and passion, because that's what makes it feel special. And at the end of the day, nobody actually cares about whether or not there is this particular OSD element or stuff like that.
You were saying that you would be interested anybody that could help to reach out as far as like a dev team is concerned. So I wanted to put that out there again at the end of the video. But what exactly are you looking for as far as if you could get like the perfect help? What would the perfect help look like for you with this?
Honestly, the most important thing to me would be that it's somebody who is also passionate about it, because I don't want to add half-baked stuff. Like every feature I add, I have developed to the fullest. For example, a lot of the features which landed in the current release candidate have been 2 years in the making, and
Oh
that's
wow.
not even exaggerating. Like
Yeah.
so, and that's basically what I would like to see from somebody joining the dev team. Like whatever you do it properly and do it in a way that matches the overall concept and positively impacts the user experience.
I see.
Half-assing stuff, there's not a lot I dislike more.
So one last question. This is just kind of a personal one for me. Uh, do you know what happened to Toto FPV?
No idea.
No clue. That's fucked, man. He's the one who originally put me on to Quicksilver like
Okay.
years ago.
Yeah.
Because I used to make the joke anytime I'd see him on Facebook in a comment section, he'd always just be like, "Just flash Quicksilver," and I started like making the joke where I would just say it for everything. I was like, "I just flash Quicksilver," just kind of poking fun at him. And then I finally tried Quicksilver, and I was like, "Oh shit, I see what he was talking about. This is good."
Well, I was in contact with him. It was kind of funny because I saw the same posts and videos popping up that you did, but at that point we had never talked.
No kidding.
He apparently he just came across the repository, flashed it, and then started like the propaganda.
I mean, yeah, he promoted the hell out of it. The only reason I ever heard about it was from him.
Yeah.
I saw him talking about it
Ev-
constantly.
Eventually he hit me up, and he actually, that was really nice of him. He has contact to some of the manufacturers, and he was the first one who ever put me in touch with some of them. So basically, most of the support from manufacturers we have today is actually because of him. He made the connect, and then last time we talked, like it was quite normal for him to disappear for a couple of weeks or months. That I think a lot of people in this hobby have that they just other stuff happens.
Sure, yeah, life.
Yeah, and yeah, at some point he showed back up, and I think he said he's expecting a child or something.
Yeah, that'll change it.
So yeah, I think his life situation changed, and I'm sure once the kiddo is older, he will show up again.
Yeah, I hope so. I kind of miss seeing the posts all the time. But thank you so much for your time, man, and thank you for the time that not that you put in today, but in general that you've put into the firmware. I do enjoy Quicksilver a lot, and I have no hatred for beta flight except for the fact that I'm too stupid to understand a lot of it, and it just gets overcomplicated.
I have quads too where I run Betaflight or INAV on it, because there I just need the features for some reason or another.
Yeah,
Like
right.
I got a 7-inch long range setup. There I run INAV because I want to have the GPS rescue and stuff. I gotta be honest, most of the techniques we use are nothing special in itself. When I add these features, I'm almost like curating. Like I never really invent something new because most of this has been done in some way or another.
Yeah, it's just kind of
I
how it's
just
all
try
put
to
together.
yeah, I just try to make it a nice package. I feel like stuff that works well on the Whoop usually translates pretty well to a 5-inch, but not necessarily the other way. In that regard, what I do on my 5-inch is I just drop most of the filtering. I just go very, very little filtering because I got a great carbon frame which is super stiff, and I got good motors which run smoothly. So yeah, I just drop all the filtering out of it, and then it's just once you drop all of the filtering out of it, it's just a pit controller. Then you just tune it, and off it fucking goes.
Yeah,
Um, and that's something I feel like Quicksilver makes very easy. If you can tune, Quicksilver makes it super straightforward for you. The presets, the process on the presets actually is um, most of the presets that exist today are actually my tunes. Yeah, like the 65, 75, 2, 3-inch, and so on. Those are all tunes I have generated at some point. Yeah, but that's the thing. Like I take Quicksilver, I run it on a bunch of different crafts of that class, and I generate a tune, and then I just try to find a good middle ground, like a happy medium between all the tunes I've generated. And the idea there really is, honestly, I always find it not disappointing. That's saying too much. But when I hear people, okay, I just use the preset, I'm I'm almost disappointed because the idea there would be you take the preset as a baseline so that you are reasonably close to a good tune, and then you tweak it from there. That's really what I would like people, what I would love see people do.
Right, yeah,
That they,
to get into the tuning side of it.
yeah, and take it a little step further
Yeah.
because yeah, the presets are pretty good, but that's it. And I swear to you, if it flies pretty good on the presets, it will fly great with a little bit of tinkering.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, I'd agree with that too. I think the simplicity for a lot of people is what they're looking for because a lot of people, when they look at firmware, it's a bit overwhelming. You know, like some people are really good at putting things together, like just building the hardware side of it, and want nothing to do with the software side, and vice versa. Some people would much rather sit and tinker with tunes and black box tuning and all that shit all day, as opposed to just try to get in the air as soon as possible. So I think it's good. The presets are a good option for some, but I do see your argument for wanting them to tinker with the tune a little more.
That's, I think, something not a lot of people have, let's say, discovered. When I say simplicity, it goes further than getting into the air as quickly as possible. One thing I personally struggle to generate good tunes on Betaflight. If it doesn't fly well out of the box, I usually have to spend a lot of time trying to make it fly great, like these last, say, 10-ish%. And not like the last 1%, I usually don't bother because that's too much work for 1% improvement.
Yeah.
But yeah, roughly the last 10%. Getting that out of Betaflight, in my opinion, is very hard because I always think about it in terms of flow of signal. Like, I get my gyro input and my craft reacts to it in some manner. And understanding this graph is something that makes tuning so much easier and easier to reason about. That's the point, basically. If you understand how the signal flows, you can actually reason about tunes. And with Betaflight, their flow has become so complicated that it's. I've read a lot of the Betaflight source code. I've looked at their flow diagrams. They have some. You can look it up, like how the signal flows through Betaflight. But I still struggle to understand it. And with Quicksilver, that's just super simple. Like, it's literally what you see is what you get. The stuff you configure in the interface, in the configurator, like the set of filters and the pits. That's everything there is. Like, Quicksilver doesn't do anything beyond what you can actually configure there. So at that point, it becomes easier to reason about your tune and about filters. And at the end of the day, I think that's actually what's helping the people getting the craft to fly better, because the results of what they are changing are more predictable because it's simpler overall. Not necessarily extra stuff, but Betaflight actually tries to do some stuff behind the scenes for you, which can be nice, but also makes it intransparent.
I see.
And with Quicksilver, like, I've been asked by technically inclined people before, like, surely Quicksilver can't be this simple and fly this good. No, it is. Like,
Is there some type of baked-in crash recovery in Quicksilver?
absolutely not.
Okay.
I feel like that's one of the things I was just talking about. Build a, in my opinion, no, it's obvious basically. Build a good pit controller, let it do its thing, and it does some of these things better than you would ever think. And it's funny actually because quite a lot of people, when they switch to Quicksilver, Acro mode, racers usually, they ask about the automatic crash recovery that Betaflight has, and of course, that's an interesting feature, and in some situations it works quite well. But I always tell them, maybe just try Quicksilver first, and maybe even without any additional features, it will work well enough for you.
Well, again, man. Thank you so much for your time today. I don't want to keep you anymore. I would appreciate it in the future if you just keep it under your hat. That perhaps you might want to come on once for the live show, and we'll chat more. Not so much about Quicksilver, but more so about who you are outside of Quicksilver. I know for sure that there are a lot of people that would be interested in hearing more about the man behind the avocado.
You don't talk about the avocado.